Admiral Cale Dravain studied the starfield through the observation dome, his reflection faint against the scattered light of distant suns. The War Council chamber hummed with low voices, the weariness of defeat etched into every admiral's face. They had gathered here too many times, and each time the reports grew darker. Another colony gone, another fleet scattered. The Orictel Dominion advanced with a precision that seemed inhuman, as if every ship in their armadas shared a single, ruthless mind. Humanity's strategies, however carefully crafted, crumbled like sand before the tide. Cale clenched his hands behind his back, as though the force of his restraint could hold together what was unraveling before his eyes. Around the long obsidian table, the men he had chosen for council sat in uneasy silence. Captain Rourke Thalen leaned forward with restless energy, his broad shoulders tense, eyes sharp with the impatience of a man who preferred battles fought in steel rather than words. Across from him, strategist Malvek Rain arranged data slates with meticulous precision, his hawk-like features hardened into contempt for what he considered futile discussion. Malvek's faith in doctrine had not wavered, even as doctrine proved useless. He was the Academy's star pupil, once the embodiment of human strategic pride, and now the most insistent voice declaring that the war could still be won if only others would adhere to the principles he preached. Archivist Torvin Jare, the eldest of them, seemed out of place among such hardened officers. A thin man with ink-stained fingers, he carried the air of a scholar rather than a warrior. Yet Cale had brought him here because sometimes knowledge forgotten in dusty archives proved sharper than the cleanest blade. The Admiral allowed the silence to stretch until it became unbearable. Then he spoke, his voice low and deliberate. "We have faced them in every configuration our training permits. Phalanx, wedge, hammer and anvil, spiral envelopment, each shattered within hours. They anticipate us before we move. Gentlemen, what would you suggest we do when every known strategy fails?" Rourke struck the table with his palm. "We stop thinking like them. We hit where they don't expect it, even if it looks like madness. Straight assaults, reckless feints, whatever keeps them from predicting our intent. Sitting here, talking circles, that's what's killing us." Malvek's lips curled. "Madness is not strategy. Discipline wins wars, not reckless bravado. If we abandon order, we surrender the very thing that distinguishes us from rabble. The Dominion will cut through undisciplined chaos as easily as they cut through everything else." Torvin cleared his throat softly, hesitant to intrude on the clash of military egos. "If I may, there is something I came across in the archives. Records from the Academy years ago. A cadet whose work was unusual." His eyes flicked briefly toward Cale, who did not respond. The Admiral's gaze remained fixed on the stars, but the tightening of his jaw betrayed recognition. "Unusual?" Rourke leaned toward him, intrigued despite himself. Torvin produced a battered volume, its binding cracked with age. She attended the strategy courses, but never participated. Reports say she spent most of her time asleep in the lecture halls. Her instructors despaired of her, her peers mocked her. And yet, she filled these notebooks. He placed the tome upon the table, and for a moment its worn cover seemed to draw the room's attention like a silent gravity well. Malvek scoffed. "We waste time with the scribbles of a girl who couldn't even remain conscious during instruction? Is this what the fleet has come to, seeking salvation in the laziness of a dropout?" Rourke ignored him, already flipping through the pages. What he found made his brow furrow. "These aren't random doodles. Look at this. Fleet formations drawn like spirals, collapsing and reforming. Arrows curving back on themselves. It's like she thought of battles as waves or storms." Cale finally turned from the viewport. His expression carried the weight of memory. Illyra Vane. The name settled into the chamber like dust upon ancient stone. "Yes, I remember her. She was in my lectures once, long before any of you held rank. She never raised her hand, never spoke, always seemed half lost in dreams. Yet I recall, she handed me an essay once. No structure, no thesis, only a torrent of speculation. She said our wars were too linear, too bound to lines and hierarchies. I dismissed her then, His voice darkened. Perhaps I was wrong. Malvek bristled. Admiral, with respect, to stake our survival on nonsense is. Kale cut him off with a gesture sharp as a blade. I have watched our survival stake itself upon every conventional wisdom you and I were taught, Malvek. And I have seen it fail, again and again. We face an enemy that thrives on prediction. If these so-called scribbles hold a thought alien enough to confound them, then we will study it. Torvin inclined his head, relief softening his features. I believe she was not sleeping at all, Admiral. I believe she was dreaming, and those dreams found form in her notes. Rourke's grin returned, fierce and reckless. Then let's dream with her, because straight lines are getting us killed. Kale closed the notebook with deliberate care, his fingers resting on the cracked leather. Gentlemen, I will not pretend I know what these ideas mean. But I know this. We are standing at the edge of extinction. If the only way forward is through madness, then we shall walk into madness with eyes open. The chamber fell silent once more, but this time the silence carried something different. Not despair, but the faint stirring of possibility. Beyond the viewport, the stars burned cold and bright, indifferent to human fate. Yet for the first time in many weeks, Kale felt the weight upon his shoulders shift, if only slightly. The war had not changed. The enemy still closed upon them with merciless precision. But a door had cracked open, and through it drifted the ghost of a cadet who had once slept through every lesson, only to leave behind fragments of a dream that might save them all. Kale placed the notebook at the center of the table, its shadow stretching across the obsidian surface. From this moment, we do not look back. We look only at what she left us. Dismissed. One by one the men rose, each carrying his own doubts and ambitions, but none could shake the strange current that now hummed beneath their thoughts. As the chamber emptied, Kale remained behind, staring at the stars once more. He did not know whether humanity's salvation lay in the pages of that book. But he knew, with a clarity that chilled and steadied him both, that the war was no longer a matter of doctrines and simulations. It was a matter of dreams. And for the first time, Kale wondered if perhaps the girl who slept through every strategy class had been awake in a way none of them could yet comprehend. You said. The notebook lay open beneath the council chamber's light, its faded pages filled with curling diagrams and fragmented notes that defied all conventional structure. Admiral Kale Dravane leaned over them with quiet intensity, while Captain Rourke Thalen and Archivist Torvin Jare argued in hushed voices. Strategist Malvek Rain remained at a calculated distance, his arms folded as if sheer disapproval could shield him from what he considered foolishness. Every eye returned again and again to the drawings, spirals of fleets like whirlpools, formations that seemed to collapse into themselves, and arrows scrawled in directions no sane commander would order his men to move. It makes no sense, Malvek declared at last, his tone dripping with disdain. There is no clarity, no hierarchy. A fleet must be directed with precision. This is chaos disguised as insight. Rourke jabbed a finger at one of the spirals, his dark eyes gleaming with a dangerous kind of curiosity. And yet chaos may be exactly what we need. Every time we move with clarity, the Orgtel cut us to pieces. Predictability is a noose. What if this, he tapped the page, is a way to make us unpredictable even to ourselves? Torvin adjusted his spectacles, his voice measured and careful. I have compared these sketches to natural patterns, currents in oceans, flocks of birds, the migration of insects. She mimicked them all. Illyra was not writing battle orders. She was imagining warfare as an ecosystem, something alive, not constrained by lines on a map. Kale straightened, the weight of command heavy in his voice. Theory will not save us. We must test it. Captain Thalen, assemble a detachment. A small strike force, nothing more. You will take these patterns and attempt to translate them into maneuvers. If they fail, the cost will be containable. If they succeed, he let the thought linger, unfinished, yet sharp enough to cut the room into silence. Malvek's voice flared hot. Admiral, to entrust lives to the incoherent ramblings of a cadet who never once passed her classes is dereliction of duty. You risk our fleet on nonsense. Kale's stare pinned him in place. I risk them on hope. And if you have anything better to offer, now is the time. Malvek said nothing. The room held its breath. Within days, Rourke's detachment, a mere cluster of 5 destroyers and 2 frigates, slipped into the frontier where the Oryctel patrolled. Their enemy was a single cruiser and its escorts, a force superior on paper. By every known doctrine, the outcome was predetermined. Human ships scattered, alien weapons carving through them. Yet Rourke gave his men orders that seemed absurd. Engines fired in conflicting bursts, lines broke apart, ships moved in crooked arcs that resembled flight more than battle. Crewmen stared at consoles in disbelief, unable to predict the next command even from their own captain. The Oryctel engaged with mechanical precision, their formation closing in to deliver the killing blow. But then something happened no algorithm had foreseen. The destroyers, weaving like startled birds, converged at impossible angles, releasing their salvos not as a unified wall, but as scattered strikes. The Dominion vessels, conditioned to counter logical patterns, hesitated. Their predictive matrices faltered, leaving them vulnerable to chaos that followed no equation. The alien cruiser shuddered under unexpected fire, its escorts tangled in their own maneuvers, until the entire formation disintegrated in disarray. When the silence of victory fell across the comms, the crews scarcely believed it. They had bled for the win, 2 destroyers lost and countless lives extinguished, but for the first time in months they had prevailed against the Oryctel without retreat. Rourke's grin, weary yet feral, echoed across the fleet's transmissions. She may have been asleep, but her dreams fight harder than our textbooks. The news spread quickly, faster than Kale could control. Officers whispered of the sleeping cadet, the forgotten girl whose notebooks had conjured a miracle. Rourke was hailed as reckless and brilliant in equal measure, while Malvek denounced the victory as luck, insisting chaos could not be scaled into a war doctrine. Yet the fleet's mood shifted palpably. Where despair had weighed down every corridor, now a fragile current of belief stirred. Kale convened his council once more, the notebook laid between them like an uninvited guest. Torvin presented further analysis, pointing to notations hidden within the margins, fragmented equations, odd phrases that suggested Illyra had anticipated an enemy who thrived on prediction. It is as though she foresaw the Oryctel, he murmured, his voice a mix of awe and unease. Rourke leaned back, arms crossed, his grin gone, but his conviction fierce.
She saw something.
Call it foresight, call it genius, call it madness, I don't care. All I know is it works. We've been fighting on their terms, and we've been losing. Her way gives us a chance. Malvek slammed a hand on the table. Her way will destroy us. Do you not see? Discipline is already fraying. Commanders question orders. Crews whisper of dreams and visions. If this continues, the fleet will dissolve into superstition and anarchy. Kale studied the lines upon the page, the spirals and arcs that seemed to pull his gaze inward like a vortex. He felt the truth of both arguments pressing against him, the exhilaration of victory against the certainty of collapse. Yet the war gave him no luxury of comfort. He closed the notebook with a decisive motion. We cannot ignore this. But neither can we surrender discipline entirely. We will adapt her patterns carefully and only under strict oversight. Captain Thalen, you will refine what you learned. Strategist Rain, you will attempt to systematize it, however much you despise it. Archivist Jer, continue your study. I want every scrap of meaning you can wring from these pages. The council dispersed with tension clinging to the air, each man carrying his own conviction. Rourke walked away certain that humanity's salvation lay in embracing the dream. Malvek departed convinced that Kale's indulgence would ruin them all. Torvin returned to his archives, unsettled by the growing sense that Illyra's notes were less invention than revelation. And Kale, left alone in the quiet chamber, opened the notebook once more despite himself. The diagrams seemed to shift beneath his eyes, the lines of spirals and storms whispering of a logic that existed beyond comprehension. He closed the book quickly, unsettled by the thought that it was not he who studied Illyra's dream, but the dream that studied him. Beyond the glass of the observation dome, the Oryctel ships burned their relentless path through human space. Humanity was not yet saved. But for the first time, their enemy had bled. And in that thin margin of chaos, Kale saw the faint outline of a future no strategist could predict. You said. The Oryctel offensive swept across the frontier like a storm of iron and fire. World after world fell beneath their fleets, their conquests carried out with an efficiency that mocked every desperate human defense. Admiral Kale Dravain felt the weight of it with every new report, yet his eyes were fixed not on the despair, but on the unorthodox victories Captain Rourke Thalen had begun to deliver. Where traditional lines collapsed, the dream-born tactics of Illyra Vane turned battles into unpredictable maelstrom, and within that maelstrom, humanity carved out survival. Kale stood at the heart of the war room, surrounded by projections of star systems under threat. His staff reported casualty counts and enemy movements with grim precision, but his attention rested on the shifting holographic swirls Rourke had crafted, imitations of Illyra's sketches. They were not formations in the traditional sense, but living patterns, fleets scattering and reconverging in ways that made sense only in motion. They defy expectation, Kale murmured, half to himself. And in that defiance lies their strength. Rourke entered, still wearing the unbuttoned jacket of a man who had come straight from the deck of his ship. He carried himself with irreverent confidence, though exhaustion shadowed his face. Another strike completed, Admiral. We lost the Valiant and most of her crew, but the Oryctel retreated with twice our losses. They couldn't track us, not fully. It's working. Malvek Rain, ever the skeptic, was quick to interject. Working? We bleed men by the hundreds with every engagement. Your chaos squanders discipline, and our commanders are losing control of their crews. How long before this madness consumes the fleet from within? Rourke's jaw tightened. Better to bleed and win than die with your perfect lines intact. Order hasn't saved us. Dreams have. Torvin Jare spoke softly from the edge of the room, his scholarly presence almost spectral. The patterns she left us were never meant to be easy. They were meant to change us. Her note spoke of it. Leaders must surrender pride, let the pattern guide the whole. If we cling too tightly to old structures, the dream will collapse. Kale let their arguments settle into silence before answering. Both of you are right. We gain ground, but we pay dearly for it. And the cost will rise as the Oryctel adapt. This is no salvation yet. It is only a reprieve. That reprieve was tested at Death Prime. The Oryctel descended upon the human bastion with a fleet so vast that the stars seemed blotted out. Civilians crowded into shelters while Kale's armada formed its defense. Rourke, commanding a vanguard, proposed unleashing one of Illyra's most radical designs, the spiral collapse. It called for entire squadrons to break formation, retreating in concentric arcs only to fold inward at the last moment, a maneuver that risked complete disintegration if misjudged. Malvek condemned it as suicide, his fury echoing through the command chamber. Kale weighed the choice in silence, his hand resting on the worn leather of Illyra's notebook. The logic of doctrine told him to refuse. The memory of every defeat told him to gamble. We will execute the spiral, he ordered, his voice firm. And may it either save us or bury us. The battle was chaos incarnate. Human ships scattered in spirals, retreating as though broken, while the Oryctel surged forward with lethal precision. The Dominion believed victory certain, pressing into what looked like disarray. Then, at the critical moment, the spirals folded. Fleets converged from impossible angles, their fire erupting in a storm that tore into the enemy's heart. The Oryctel flagship cracked beneath the assault, its destruction sending shockwaves through their lines. Cheers erupted across human channels, though many of those voices were silenced before the battle's end. Ships burned in every direction, wreckage littering the void. The cost was staggering, yet Death Prime stood. Humanity had delivered its first grand defeat to the Dominion. When the smoke cleared, Kale gathered his surviving commanders. Rourke's uniform was scorched, his eyes alight with fierce pride. "You saw them hesitate," he said. For the first time, they didn't know what to do. "They're not invincible." Malvec, pale and trembling, countered with bitter restraint. "And how many of our own hesitated, Admiral?" Disciplined phrase with every battle fought this way. "Soon our men will fight not as soldiers, but as zealots, believing themselves guided by her ghost. We are abandoning order, and when this war ends, what will remain of humanity?" Torvin placed a hand over the notebook, as if protecting it. Perhaps this is what humanity was always meant to become, not rigid, not predictable, but alive in ways machines cannot grasp. Illyra dreamed of war as a living storm. Perhaps we were too blind to see until now. Kale listened, his expression unreadable. He saw the pride burning in Rourke, the fear etched into Malvec, and the quiet reverence shaping Torvin's words. They embodied the fracture within the fleet, chaos and order, dream and discipline. He knew both sides carried truth. Victory had been won, but the cost pressed on him like iron chains. That night, Kale walked alone through the observation deck, stars burning beyond the glass. He could still hear the screams of the dying over comms, the rapture of survivors shouting of impossible triumph. Between those extremes, his conscience balanced on a knife's edge. He whispered into the void, though no one could hear him. Better a living chaos than a perfect extinction. The stars gave no answer, but in their silence Kale felt the unrelenting presence of the war yet to come. The Oryctel had tasted defeat, but they would not retreat into darkness. They would adapt, just as humanity had. And when they returned, it would be with a fury born not of arrogance, but of necessity. The dream had carried them this far, but Kale knew the price was only beginning to reveal itself. Far behind the lines, whispers spread through the fleet of a cadet who had once slept through every class. Some said she dreamed not for herself, but for all of humanity. Others warned that dreams could consume as easily as they saved. And so the men of the fleet prepared, caught between the order that bound them and the chaos that now defined them, waiting for the storm that would decide whether Illyra's vision was salvation or doom. "You said." The Dominion returned with a weapon unlike anything humanity had faced. At the edge of the Concordance Rift, their fleets gathered in terrible symmetry, encircling a vast construct of luminous spires and rotating rings, the Concordance engine. Intelligence reported its purpose with chilling clarity, a device capable of predicting every possible maneuver, mapping outcomes until no path to victory remained. It was strategy made manifest, an enemy designed not only to destroy human fleets but to erase the very notion of resistance. Admiral Kale Dravain convened his council within the flagship Resolute. The atmosphere was heavier than any he had endured, the air almost vibrating with the magnitude of what lay ahead. Captain Rourke Thalen leaned forward, restless fire in his eyes, while strategist Malvec Rain sat rigid, hands clenched on the table, his disdain sharpened by desperation. Archivist Torvin Jare, pale from sleepless nights spent poring over Illyra Vane's fragments, kept the battered notebook close, its worn pages covered in his own annotations. "They mean to end us here," Kale began, voice calm though the tension in his shoulders betrayed the strain. "The engine will see every plan, every order, before we even issue it. No doctrine can prevail against such foresight." He let the words settle, heavy and final, before continuing. "There is only one path left to us, to abandon predictability altogether. To embrace her dream in its entirety." Malvec surged to his feet, anger breaking through the mask of restraint. "This is madness. Already our fleets crumble under the weight of chaos. You would cast aside the last remnants of discipline, the very foundation of command? We will annihilate ourselves before the Dominion fires a single shot." Rourke rose as well, his defiance equal and opposite. We've tried your way, Malvek. It buried our men in orderly graves. The Dominion cannot be beaten by lines and logic. Only by becoming something they cannot read, cannot anticipate. If that means chaos, then chaos is our strength. Torvin's voice, quiet but firm, cut between them. Her notes spoke of this. A final convergence. A moment when order would become a weapon of our enemies, and only dream logic could prevail. She wrote as though she knew this battle was inevitable. Perhaps she foresaw it, perhaps she simply understood more than we dared. Either way, we stand where she said we would stand. Cale's eyes swept the table, seeing in each man the fracture of the fleet. Malvek's fear of dissolution, Rourke's reckless conviction, Torvin's reverence for the dream. He felt the weight of command settle like a stone upon his chest. We have no time for doubt. We scatter the fleets. No central formation, no hierarchy. Each captain will act as instinct guides, bound only by the patterns we have studied. We fight not as soldiers, but as fragments of the storm. The order, once given, spread through the armada like fire through dry grass. Commanders balked, crews whispered prayers or curses, but all obeyed. At the Concordance Rift, the human fleet dispersed into wild arcs, ships darting like sparks from a broken flame. The Dominion responded with cold precision, their formations tightening, the Concordance engine pulsing with ominous light as it calculated futures faster than any mind could conceive. The first clash was brutal. Human vessels shattered beneath the Dominion's focused volleys, and for a moment despair threatened to drown the fleet. But then the dream took hold. Squadrons appeared to retreat, only to collide again from uncharted angles. Ships feigned breakdowns, then ignited in suicidal charges that cracked enemy formations. The chaos was incomprehensible to the engine, which faltered when confronted with the logic. Its predictions unraveled as battles twisted into forms no linear mind could model. Rourke's voice rang across the comms, fierce and alive. They can't see us anymore. Keep moving, keep braking, keep them guessing. His flagship, the Stormwake, carved through enemy lines like a blade born by madness, guiding scattered wings into moments of brutal convergence before scattering them again. The Dominion reeled, their perfect symmetry collapsing into confusion. But victory demanded sacrifice. The engine's defenses tightened, focusing on the human vanguard. The Stormwake took direct fire, its hull burning as systems failed one by one. Rourke did not retreat. Instead, he set a collision course for the heart of the Concordance engine, his voice steady even as alarms screamed in the background. "Admiral, this is the last movement of her song. We finish it here." Cale's chest constricted. "Rourke, pull back. That's an order." The reply came through static, resolute, and unyielding. "With respect, Admiral, some orders can't be obeyed. If we are to be unpredictable, then let my death be the proof." The Stormwake drove into the engine's core, weapons blazing until its frame dissolved in light. The explosion tore through the construct, unraveling its predictive systems in a cascade of brilliance. The Dominion fleet convulsed, suddenly blind, their cohesion shattered. Humanity surged into the breach, ships converging like fragments of a dream completing its final pattern. The enemy broke, and for the first time since the war began, they fled. Silence fell in the aftermath, broken only by the whispers of survivors and the faint hum of damaged systems. Cale stood on the bridge of the Resolute, staring at the wreckage of the engine and the drifting remains of the Stormwake. Victory had been bought with blood and brilliance, with chaos and sacrifice. Humanity had survived, but at a cost that could never be repaid. In the council chamber, Malvek bowed his head at last. His voice was low, stripped of arrogance. Even the admirals deferred to her tactic. Perhaps discipline was never our salvation. Perhaps it was always the dream. Torvin closed the notebook with reverent care, sealing its pages as though returning a relic to the tomb of its maker. Her vision has carried us here, but we must guard it carefully. Dream too long, and even salvation can consume. Cale dismissed them, lingering alone with the silence of the chamber. He placed a hand upon the worn leather cover, feeling its weight as though it contained not just notes, but the soul of the woman who had written them. Beyond the viewport, stars glimmered in quiet witness to both triumph and loss. He whispered into the emptiness, words meant only for himself. You slept through every lesson, and yet you dreamed what none of us could see. Perhaps you were never asleep at all. The war was not over, but for the first time, humanity stood with more than survival. They stood with the future. And in that future, Kale knew, her dream would remain, both a weapon and a warning.